Hey everyone, today we'll be making perfect pie crust. So let's start with 2½ cups of flour plus 2 tablespoons. And then we're also going to add 1½ tablespoons of powdered sugar, which is going to make it a little bit more pliable, a little easier to roll out, which is great. Now let's add 1¼ teaspoon of kosher salt and give that a quick whisk until it's incorporated. This will mix up certainly more in the food processor that we're about to use. So let's add half of this mixture into the food processor along with a 1/4 cup of shortening. We add the flour in batches so that the little pieces of butter are definitely consistent in size versus having large chunks with smaller chunks. We want to have a nice uniform buttery crust. So let's add in that shortening like I mentioned. Give it a quick pulse about 5 times, really quickly pressing that button. Being careful not to overmix the dough at any point. But we're getting a leg up on this mix because we are adding in half the flour with some of the fat. And now we're going to add the rest of the flour. And we're going to add 12 tablespoons of very, very, very cold unsalted butter. And I'm talking like put your butter in the freezer right before you start pulling out all the rest of your ingredients in the food processor and such. You don't want it frozen, but you want it to be very cold and you want it to stay cold throughout. Pulse that about 10 times and then give it a check. You'll see that most of the butter is incorporated, but we're going to have a few larger chunks in there. So we're going to want to redistribute that. So make sure your food processor is off, open up your lid, and then redistribute any large chunks of butter, just so it has a good chance of breaking up into pretty evenly sized pieces. So pulse that a few more times, give it a check. You should see pretty much pea-sized shapes of butter throughout, which is what we're looking for. And now we're going to take our ice water and only add 4 tablespoons to start. We don't want to add too much water, but if you see that the dough is not forming well, add 1 or 2 tablespoons more, give it a quick pulse, and check it again. We want the dough nicely hydrated. So once you get that pulsed and mixed, you should start to see a dough form. As you can see here, it's a little bit crumbly, and I use plastic wrap as sort of an assist. It kind of keeps that barrier of the warmth of my hand a little bit away from this dough. So since this is a double crust recipe, we're going to unravel the plastic wrap, cut it in half, shape it into discs, and wrap and store in the fridge for half an hour. We want the dough to have an adequate rest period so that the butter stays extra cold, but also the dough is going to continue to hydrate while it's resting. Once it's rested, pull it out of the fridge and put it onto a nice lightly floured surface. Personally, I like to use a rolling mat since it's a bit more porous and there's fewer contact points to stick the dough straight to the surface. So if you don't have one, don't worry about it. You can roll between 2 pieces of parchment paper. You can also just roll straight on your very clean surface that's lightly floured. Make sure to check underneath the crust every so often to make sure it's not sticking and just add a little bit more flour in case it is. Continue rolling till it's about 1/4 inch thick, and at this point you can use your rolling pin to gently lift the pie crust onto the pie plate that you'll be baking it in. So for this example, I'll be baking my apple cream pie recipe, which only requires 1 crust, but this recipe does make 2, which is great if you have a top and bottom crust that you need for your pie. After you lay the crust onto the pie plate, cut the overhang, leaving about 1/2 inch to 1 inch on the edges. And if you're crimping your pie crust, use 2 knuckles from one hand on the outer edge of the pie crust and your index finger from your other hand on the inner edge of the pie crust, and press with your index finger toward the crevice of your 2 knuckles, repeating as you go around until you have a beautiful crimp. Otherwise, you can also use the tines of a fork around the edge of the crust, just pressing down until it's nice and uniform. Optionally, you can make an egg wash for your pie of 1 egg white and a splash of cream and apply that to the crust, and bake the pie according to the recipe instructions. And there you have a perfectly buttery, flaky, tender, delicious pie crust. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks all!